The screaming began long before anyone entered the asylum, long before the walls cracked and the shadows burned themselves into the floor, long before the gates rusted shut as if the place itself wanted to hold its secrets forever. But what no one understood was that the asylum didn't keep the screams inside. It lured people with them. Anyone who heard that soft echo, distant like something calling from behind a dream, felt a strange pull, an invitation. And on the night the fog was so thick that the moon vanished completely, someone answered that invitation, stepping through the open iron gate as if guided by an unseen hand. The air was colder inside the courtyard, so cold that each breath escaped like smoke, curling upward into the darkness. The silence was heavy, thick, and strangely alive. It felt like the entire asylum was holding its breath, waiting. As the door creaked open, the first corridor stretched ahead, illuminated by flickering emergency lights that cast long, twitching shadows across the floor. Each light buzzed like it was struggling to stay alive. A faint metallic smell floated through the stale air. Old blood, rust, and something else. Something rotten. Something that had been sitting in the dark for too long. The first step inside made the floorboards groan, as though the asylum recognized a new presence. Dust swirled in slow, drifting clouds, disturbed by a breeze that had no source. Along the walls, peeling paint curled like dead skin, hanging in loose strips that trembled with each vibration. The darkness was thick, swallowing the edges of the hallway so deeply that the boundaries between wall and void seemed to blur together. A wheelchair sat abandoned in the center of the hallway, its wheels turning slightly, as if stirred by invisible fingers. The sound was faint, too faint, like a whisper of movement. Then, a sudden metallic clatter echoed from deeper inside the asylum. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakably intentional. The kind of noise something makes when it wants you to follow. Ahead, a shattered clock hung crooked on the wall. Its hands ticked backward, struggling, scraping softly, fighting against time itself. A sudden gust of cold air passed by, almost brushing the skin, making the tiny hairs on the arms rise. A door on the left slowly creaked open by itself, inch by inch, revealing nothing but pitch-black darkness inside, as if the room had swallowed all light whole. The darkness pulsed, like it was breathing. Through a broken mirror leaning against the wall, the faint outline of a figure appeared, not standing in the hallway, not physically present, but reflected. Its silhouette was tall, unnaturally so, with eyes glowing faintly within the reflection. The moment the viewer turned, the hallway behind them was empty, but the reflection lingered a moment longer before fading into static. The corridor lights began clicking off one by one behind, each plunge into darkness rhythmically closing in. Footsteps echoed ahead, slow at first, then stopping abruptly.
A pale hand suddenly slipped underneath a metal door ahead, dragging itself backward as though something had just pulled it down into the darkness on the other side. A child's toy, a small spinning top, rotated softly nearby, spinning slower and slower before tipping over and rolling toward the viewer. From the ceiling, a dark figure crawled across the tiles, limbs bending at impossible angles, its body clinging like an insect. It vanished into a vent just as a thick drop of dark red liquid dripped from the grate above. Another room revealed a hospital bed, shaking violently, held down by no one. Every bolt screeched in protest as it slammed repeatedly against the floor. Further down, faint phantom footsteps appeared in the dust. No feet, only prints, moving rapidly, stopping, turning, sprinting directly toward the viewer before vanishing inches away. In the distance, a ghost nurse stood perfectly still, her face blurred, her head tilted ever so slightly, as though listening. Papers from a desk suddenly flew up, swirling around the room in a violent spiral, pages slashing through the air like blades before falling dead silent. A heavy metal door slammed shut behind the viewer without a single breeze. The shadows along the floor stretched unnaturally, lengthening like growing tendrils reaching toward the center of the hallway. One shadow detached itself from the rest, rising upward as though lifting from the floor, forming a vague human-like shape with hollow eye sockets. A cracked section of wall pulsed outward, revealing a moving eye beneath the plaster, watching, unblinking, following the viewer's every movement. A patient wearing a hospital gown drifted through a wall, transparent, silent, head hanging loosely to one side. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged softly, its doors sliding open to reveal total darkness. Inside that darkness, two thin arms slowly extended outward before instantly retracting as the doors closed. Emergency lights along the ceiling began flashing red, the entire floor bathing in a blood-like glow that pulsed like a beating heart. Distorted screams echoed faintly, not loud, but warped, broken, like audio played through a damaged speaker. The tiles on the floor began absorbing a dark liquid seeping outward like living ink, moving in deliberate trails toward a corner where a figure with a stitched-up face stood motionless, its mouth sewn shut, but its breathing rapid and desperate. A cracked window suddenly burst open, sending a flock of black crows flying out, wings beating violently against the stagnant air as their shadows danced across the hallway walls. A doll's head on the floor rotated slowly, its plastic eyes scratched, its expression frozen in a twisted smile. A bedsheet rose up from an empty mattress, lifting slowly, revealing the faint silhouette of someone or something lying beneath it. It collapsed suddenly, flattening back into stillness. Long black strands of hair fell through the ceiling vent above, swaying gently, as if someone was hanging upside down inside the ducts. The walls trembled, cracking open with faint screaming embedded within the vibrations. An old television burst into static, displaying a mosaic of distorted faces staring directly outward, their expressions shifting rapidly from neutral to agony and back again. A thin, demon-like creature crawled from beneath the bed, its limbs scraping the ground, head jerking with unnatural movement. Ghost hands pressed against a window from the other side, leaving faint fog trails as they dragged downward. The hallway stretched out endlessly, elongating like a nightmare labyrinth, each step echoing more distantly than the last. Further inside, a wheelchair spun wildly in place, as if driven by a violent, invisible force. Bloody footprints appeared one at a time across the ground. Ghostly figures floated upward as the lights flickered violently around them, fading through the ceiling. A nurse's mask cracked open, revealing nothing beneath it but swirling darkness. A massive hand reached from the shadows, grabbing the camera briefly before letting go. A door at the far end glowed bright red, as if heated from within. Smoke gathered again, this time condensing into a tall form, eyes open inside the smoke. Reality around the hallway flickered like a failing signal, glitching. Ghostly figures floated upward as the lights flickered violently around them, fading through the ceiling. A nurse's mask cracked open, revealing nothing beneath but swirling darkness. A massive hand reached from the shadows, grabbing the camera briefly before letting go. A door at the far end glowed bright red, as if heated from within. Smoke gathered again, this time condensing into a tall form. Eyes opened inside the smoke. Reality around the hallway flickered like a failing signal, glitching. A small child with pale skin and dark, empty eyes stood silently, staring forward without blinking. Then all lights went out, except a single one behind the viewer, illuminating a silhouette slowly rising. Finally, the last moment's silence, a heartbeat, a flicker, and a demon's face burst into view, mouth stretching open in a silent scream that shook the air.